Rachel, please introduce yourself fully and tell us about your work, and please tell us a story.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rachel Dunstan Muller, and I am from the west coast of Canada. So while it is late here, it is not as late as it was for Selena. I can't imagine telling a story at 1 in the morning. I'm very impressed. For me, it's about 10:20, so it's not so bad. Thank you so much, Eric, for the privilege of being able to present in this platform. It's just amazing, all of the losses we've had with the pandemic, but to have this flip side that we are able to gather across the world and be together, that's a very special thing. The story that I'm about to share is my own story. I came to storytelling as a children's author initially, and I did some work in schools before schools kind of got shut down to outside visitors. I hope to go back into the schools when they open up again. But in the meantime, I have a children's podcast called Sticks and Stones and Stories, and you can find that at sticksandstories.com. So this is my story, and it's called I See You, Spirit. A traveler walked westward down a dusty road. She had come a long way, and she still had a long way to travel. She carried a sturdy staff in one hand to defend herself, but she rarely needed it. There was something about the way the traveler carried herself that kept wild animals from bothering her. And as for robbers or thieves, well, they would take one look at her weathered face, her simple clothing, and let her pass. She slept wherever she could find shelter at night, sometimes in a barn or an outbuilding, sometimes beside someone's hearth. Often she would simply wrap herself in her cloak and curl up in the hollow of a tree. But on this particular evening, she found herself approaching an inn at a crossroads. Now, the traveler did not carry coins or money of any kind, but she did have something of value, something those of us gathered here can understand well. She had stories. And the innkeeper, he was more than happy to trade an evening of entertainment for a hearty bowl of stew and a place for the traveler to rest her head. And as for the traveler, she did not disappoint that night. Her stories transported the inn's patrons to all kinds of magical places. They won fortunes and lost them again. They fought with dragons and were defeated by armies of mice. They courted princesses and woke up with wild beasts. And so it went on and on, well on into the night. And when at last the traveler reached the end of her final story, the innkeeper led her to a little alcove off the kitchen. She wrapped herself in her cloak and she went to sleep. The next morning, the innkeeper did everything in his power to try to convince the traveler to stay for one more night. He would gladly have paid, and paid her well, for another evening of enchantment. But the traveler insisted that she had to be back on the road. And just where might you be headed? Said the innkeeper. West, said the traveler, as far west as the road will take me. Ah, well then, it's a good thing I asked, said the innkeeper. The road west goes through a haunted wood. No one takes that road. You want to go north, at least as far as the second bridge. Then you can safely turn west again. Well, the traveler thanked the innkeeper, both for his hospitality and his words of advice, and she swung her bundle over her pack. When she reached the crossroads just beyond the inn, she turned briefly in each direction. To the east, the way she'd come, to the north, to the south, and finally to the west. And off in the distance, she could see a forest, and it did look vaguely forbidding, even from miles away. But despite the innkeeper's warning, it was the west road that she took. It was mid-morning before she reached the edge of that forest, but it certainly did not feel like morning once she stepped foot under those dark and gloomy trees. Everything in that forest seemed muted, muffled somehow. Colors were dull. There was no birdsong. In fact, the forest was eerily silent, as if every living creature were holding its breath. But still the traveler walked on, deeper and deeper into the woods, stopping only at midday for a little bread and a little cheese. And if at times she felt as if she were being watched, well, she let that feeling be, and she carried on. It was nearly dusk when she reached a clearing, and the remains of what must once have been a large and stately home. It was now nearly buried in ivy. The roof was half caved in, but it would still serve as shelter. So the traveler gathered some firewood from the edge of the clearing, and she went inside. The moment she stepped across the threshold, she felt a tingle down her spine. She went at once to the stone fireplace that was still standing at the center of the house, and she built herself a fire. Shadows seemed to creep closer as she ate her supper that night. The traveler didn't shrink back from those shadows, but she didn't lie down and go to sleep after her meal was done either. Instead, she remained awake, feeding the fire, keeping it burning brightly as night settled over the house. It was as if she were waiting for something. And in the early hours of the morning, she felt an icy chill, and she knew that that something had arrived. The traveler kept her voice steady as she spoke into the darkness. I do not fear you, spirit. Come, if you are coming, there is room by the fire. And something did come forward, something dark and misshapen. In the flickering light, the traveler saw the shade of an old man, his eyes dark hollows, his body bent and crooked. I see you, spirit, said the traveler, and I see the bitterness that has twisted you. The phantom's entire body radiated malice, pure hatred, as it fixed its eyes on the traveler. But the traveler met the spirit's gaze and held it, and the spirit did not come closer. She held the spirit's gaze for so long that the fire nearly burned itself out. And then gradually, as the spirit faded and was gone. Traveler revived the dying fire, pulled her cloak tighter, and resumed her vigil. More time passed as the traveler waited, and then she felt another chill, even colder than before. Again, she addressed the darkness. I do not fear you, spirit. Come, if you are coming, there is room by the fire. And again, something came out of the night. It was the same spirit. The traveler recognized its hollow eyes, but it came in a younger form this time, the form of a man in his prime with raised fists. I see you, spirit, said the traveler, and I see the anger that has consumed you. The spirit came closer, its face a mask of rage. But again, the traveler held the spirit's gaze. And again, the spirit stopped. Long moments passed, the fire began to smolder, and then gradually, the angry spirit faded and was gone. The traveler revived the dying embers, pulled her cloak tighter, and resumed her vigil. In the very deepest part of the night, the traveler felt another chill. But this time, when she addressed the darkness, her voice was gentler. I do not fear you, spirit. Come, if you are coming. There is a place for you by the fire. The spirit took longer to appear this time. And when it did appear, it was in the form of a small, weeping child. I see you, spirit, said the traveler, and I see the loneliness that has wounded you. Come closer. The tiny shade crept closer until it was almost within reach of the flames. And again, the traveler held the spirit's gaze, and under her gaze, the child's tears began to fall more freely, and its whole body began to shake. The child looked into the traveler's eyes, and the traveler looked back, bearing witness to its sorrow. And gradually, as the night itself turned pale, the child's tears subsided, and something almost like peace passed over its face. Its tiny form became less and less distinct, and then, like a vapor, it was gone. The traveler did not revive her fire this time. Instead, she ate a little bread by the dying embers, and then she picked up her pack and her staff. The forest beyond the clearing wasn't quite as gloomy as it had been the day before. The early morning sun was just beginning to find its way all the way down to the forest floor. Colors were brighter. There was even birdsong in the trees. The traveler continued westward down the forest road. A long night had ended. A new day was beginning, and she still had many more miles to travel before her journey was done.
Thank you very much. Beautiful story. So as you were telling, I was wondering, what is the connection between this traveler being an excellent storyteller and an excellent person with this ghost? Can you say anything about that?
So the story, I mean, it came to me this way, and I think it really combines a couple of things. My mother was a healer. She was a family therapist, and she had a tremendous gift for being able to see people and for people to feel that they were seen. And so not just in her therapy, but out in the world, she just had this amazing gift. So I think that half of the story is really a tribute to my mother, that simply by being able to see people, that is a form of healing for people who feel invisible and feel that their pain has not been acknowledged. So certainly formally in the healing sessions the therapy sessions, they were going back to their childhood and addressing those. So I think that's that half is about my mother. And I think overall, this is a story about who I want to be. Um, the way that this woman carries herself in the world with this, she just occupies her space and has this quiet confidence. And so I think the storyteller, that's my part of it, I guess. I didn't know that when I wrote the story, it just came out as the story. That's just what unfolded. It's looking back at it now and seeing where the pieces came from, I think, in retrospect.
Mhm. Well, I think those two talents are related. The talent to be able to see people and the talent to be able to see stories and create and help other people see stories.
I think that's possibly true. Certainly in listening to each other's stories, we develop a much deeper empathy and sensitivity and compassion, I think. So the storyteller is also a story listener. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very, very much for sharing that story with us.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to say anything before we move on? No, it looks like we've touched the necessary points. Okay, thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.